One of the most deflating things we can hear as a coach is at the end of our sales call, our prospect says, let me think about it, right? Not only is it frustrating, but it also creates a sense of doubt and frustration and lack of clarity in your process, right? What I'm bringing in this training today is how to avoid the let me think about it. And I'm going to show you how you can pre-frame and bring the objections to the surface during the sales call that are driving those let me think about it or let me call you back tomorrow or next week, right? So first and foremost, what I want to cover are the actual objections that lead to the let me think about it, right? I don't think as a coach we've ever somebody said, well, let me think about it. Okay, no problem. Like, what are you looking at? What do you need to think about? They're always going to have something, right? And it's typically a smoke screen, but it's also there's certain parts like spouse or partner or business partner that if we're asking for a multiple four-figure investment and we're going in for the money and expecting them to buy from us today, we didn't do our own due diligence to figure out they had a spouse or business partner that needed to be a part of that decision. So what we should have done is done a quick kind of discovery triage call, set up an appointment with the spouse. So we're going to break all this down, right? So let's kind of talk about the objections first, and then we're going to go back and I'm going to show you exactly how to cover these in a very conversational and fluid way to ensure that by the time we get to the point of making an offer, we know that are we going to do it today or is it going to be, let's set a call with the spouse, right? So let's dive into it. The first one right here, and sorry, this is just a whiteboard kind of drawing it up here as we go, but the first one's clarity, right? Why don't they have enough clarity in how to handle this? So there's so many times that you'll get to the end of a sales call, and I get this all the time with coaches where it's like, I know my offer is great. I know I can serve these people. They're a perfect fit. They're in the the income demographic with their business. They have all the pain points that my clients have, and I know I can serve them. But there's just something happening in my sales calls where I'm just not getting that clear, right? I'm not getting that across. Well, here's the correlation that a lot of people don't connect with, which is your client is not necessarily, when they say, I don't have enough clarity, it's not necessarily they don't have enough clarity on your offer. It's that they don't have enough clarity that you understand their problem to the fullest extent to where you asked enough questions. You've driven that completely home to where they're like, wow, you get this as good, if not better than me. And what that shows is leadership and that you've been there and done that. And it shows, hey, I've got the tools to help you fix your problem. Right. So if you've noticed, like in any of the sales calls you've ever been in, maybe you've hired coaches in the past, one of the things that happens when you find the right coach is they ask so many questions and allow you to unravel. You'll hear me talk about this in videos all the time, right? Unravel the mess in our mind of, hey, where do I need help? How do I need help? What does it look like? What's causing the issue? Why? And sometimes it's like, well, I've got this problem, but what they don't realize is that the problem started up here as a little problem. And because of a lack of systems or process or strategy or team, that problem just starts to compound. It gets bigger, 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 bigger as it goes down the line. So if we help them identify those areas in their business or those areas in their pain point or problem or whatever you serve as a coach, that's what brings clarity, right? So why they don't have enough clarity is we haven't driven that home. So let me explain kind of a quick example. One of the questions I'm going to ask, like, okay, well, tell me a little bit about, let's just say that I'm working with I don't know, a real estate investing coach, right? They teach people how to invest in real estate. So one of the questions I'm going to ask is like, okay, well, tell me a little bit about you. Like, as far as is real estate background, what have you done? You know what? I've tried to do a bunch of rental properties of my own. I've had 4 or 5 deals under contract, and it always, they always fall apart, or the funding doesn't come through, or whatever it is, right? And it's like, okay, what happened with the funding, right? Notice my tonality and my agenda, right? There's no agenda. I'm not going to ask these questions to drive a sale. I'm going to ask these questions as like a private investigator, right? And this client is guilty of not being a client until proven innocent. And what I mean by that is if I ask enough questions, I'm going to get clarity, they're going to get clarity, and we're both going to mutually agree, hey, this is a great fit. It takes the sales process and the pressure and the anxiety that creeps up to here where your head's barely above water. It eliminates all of that, right? So when I talk about clarity, it's like, hey, well, what else have you tried? Oh, I've tried some rental properties. Okay, what happened? Why didn't it work out for you? It was either the funding wasn't there, or my partner's backed out, or this or that. Okay, no, that's frustrating for sure. What do you mean the funding fell apart? Well, I was using private money. I had some family members that were going to invest in the deal, and then they got cold feet and they backed out. And okay, Well, that makes sense. I hear that often when people are new to the business. Like, what kind of systems did you have in place, or what type of due diligence did you do with your family to verify what type of deals they want to get involved with, and what their threshold was, what the returns and expectations were, how much of that cash they needed to have liquid? What systems or conversation did you guys have about that up front? You know what, Corey? That's a really good point. I probably didn't ask nearly enough questions from my family member. They just said they'd invest in real estate, and I know they have money. Okay. So, which makes perfect sense, right? I guess when you're brand new to this, these are some of the learning lessons that a lot of newer real estate investors have to go through on their own, because they have to experience these pain points, right? And there's kind of two ways to do it. You go on your own, or you work with a coach that's been there and done that. Let me ask you, what are the parameters? Why are you looking to get involved with real estate in the first place? What does that big picture look like for you? So now you'll notice what I'm doing is, it's like I've asked a couple of questions, like, what have they done? I want to figure out at what level they're starting, because some of them might already have a couple deals under their belt, but they're like, I've done a couple wholesale deals, which is basically you're kind of a buyer and seller, you connect them and you get a finder's fee. A lot of people that are transitioning from that step to the next step, which is like doing their own rehabs, or maybe getting into some rentals, or short or long-term Airbnb, whatever it might be, they don't know there's a gap there, right? Because now all of a sudden I'm playing with my money or the bank's money, or I'm liable for the whole deal. And that creates a lot of hesitancy. So when I start asking questions, what I want to do is I want to shorten the gap from, hey, I'm here as a potential client, and I want to be over here. This is the vision, the dream, the goals, the desires, the pain points, and why my obstacles, and why I can't have it unless I do something different. And my questions that I ask, I want you to look at this as like a drawbridge. The questions bring it down to where they can walk straight across, and it's like, I'm here. I know without a doubt that Corey can help me get there, right? So as they start telling me the vision, it's like, well, for years and years, I've worked a job. I hate my boss. I'm tired of somebody else dictating my schedule. I'm tired of someone else dictating my income. I've wanted to buy a new vehicle. I've wanted to move into a different neighborhood. There's no way I'm going to be able to afford my kids' college. Okay, well, it sounds like you put a lot of thought into that. Like, how long has this been a consideration for you? Notice how I don't just go, wow. Like, I'm not acting, right? I'm being very genuine. And part of the reason I can do it this way is one of my philosophies, and I learned this from a mentor a long time ago. He said, Corey, it's high engagement, low attachment. Be willing to go to hell and back to serve your client without being attached to the outcome, meaning without being attached to a yes or a no at the end of the call. If I go into this call with full plans to serve them, not telling them and talking, asking questions and driving pain points and decision, naturally I'm the one that's creating the leadership in the conversation. They're going to follow me. As I get more clarity around all those things, notice my tonality start to change. Wow, it sounds like you put a lot of thought into this. How long have you wanted to do this? When was the last time you tried to get a rental property put together? Why now, though? Right? So notice I'm going to start driving those questions. I'm going to continue to get more clarity. It's like, what would it be like if we could get there? Hey, if we were able to step in and show you how to do that step by step, essentially pairing one of our coaches with you, and the coach treating your real estate deal as if it were their own, and showing you step by step how to walk through that particular project and deal, how do you suppose that would change the overall outcome for you? Interesting. Okay, where do you see the most obstacles in that process? Where do you feel like you're going to need the most help if our team were to step in and help you with that? What are going to be the hardest things for you to overcome, knowing that you have the keys to the kingdom, you have a team to support you and guide you? So you guys, notice what I'm doing here, right? Not only am I getting clarity, but now I'm starting to move into more of the mindset. And these don't necessarily have to be in this order, right? These can be in any order. I want the conversation to flow naturally. Like if they bring up their mindset, like, hey, I was raised in a household where we didn't talk about money, and my parents were both worked really, really hard for other people. They worked W-2 positions, and we kind of had a hard time making ends meet. And I know that there's certain blocks that I have. There's certain, things, relationships that I have with money that are not serving me, but I don't know how to break out of them. Then we don't have to go, okay, well, hold that thought. What does your spouse think? Like, go into it, right? Get into it with them, where it's like, okay, well, what do you mean by that exactly? Like when you say grew up on a tight budget, what did that actually look like? Notice my tonality is very genuine, right? It's very authentic, and I'm genuinely asking the question. I want to know, I want them to get back in that mindset. What was it like growing up in that situation? What did it feel like when mom and dad said, I can't have this because, or we can't go do this because. Now, let me be very, very clear here. I am not doing this to be an emotional terrorist. I'm doing this because I want to help them understand that what got them here is never going to get them there. Right? But I don't want to say it. I want to ask the questions around it that are going to drive them to understand, you know what? I'm ready. I have to do something different. And if I'm unwilling to, I'm going to have to just sign up for where I'm at for the rest of my life, waking up at 65, 70 years old, hoping Social Security will still be around. Plain and simple. Like that's what it is, right? So what I want to move into, let's talk about the partner or spouse a little bit. I think a lot of people drive into this conversation. A lot of coaches go into this where it's like, hey, I got world-class fulfillment. I've got a phenomenal offer. I know I can serve the heck out of this person, but they're missing one massive ingredient, and it's the spouse. So think about it. You go through this conversation like we've been going through, right? We're going through all the clarity, the questions. We're driving it home where it's like, I mean, we're getting to the absolute core, unraveling the mess in their head, where they're like, wow, you understand, like you clearly understand my problem. Keep in mind, it took us a while to get here. Like my discovery phase on this call, it might be 30 to 45 minutes. It might be 15 minutes with somebody else. But what happens is I'm checking the boxes off for them internally and subconsciously to go, oh yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Yeah, I didn't really look at that last time. Oh, you know what? You kind of pulling the curtain back and showing me something that I would have never thought of until I ran into that. Right? So as I start to ask those questions, we've got to remember something. If I ask them to make a decision today, but they're like, look, my spouse has to be involved. I didn't cover that in the first place. I should have covered that in the first 10, 15 minutes, right? Maybe it's 5 minutes, depending on how the call is going, but it needs to be at the upper part of your conversation. And the reason for it, you guys, is I want to make sure that I hold some of my ammunition. It's like, I don't want to tell them everything that's involved with the offer, what it costs, how long we're going to work together, what the coaching is going to be like, whether it's one-to-one, group, etc. I don't want to tell them about if I have a guarantee, because here's what happens. They take that data, they're going to absorb about 30% of what you tell them, and it's going to be very high level. They're going to go to their spouse and say, look, I've got this company. They're going to teach me how to invest in real estate. They're going to hold my hand for the next 6 months, and it's going to cost me 15 grand. What do you think? If you're the spouse and you're not part of that initial conversation where we're unraveling the pain points and the problems that you're having, I don't blame the spouse for being like, no, we're not doing that. 15 grand's a lot of money. Here's the problem though, you guys. It's this part right here. It's the mindset. The mindset's the problem. It's not the money. It's the relationship right here next to it with debt. It's the way that they view money. It's the way that they've been raised to view money. Think about it. Most of us were probably taught the same thing, right? Work hard for money, work hard for money. Go to school, get good grades, get a good job, save all your money, and things will work out. That was really good advice, I would imagine, back in the early 70s, maybe late 60s, when you could go get a job for GM or Ford Motor Company with a $50,000 a year position with a pension, and your wife could stay home or your spouse could stay home and raise the kids, and you could retire on 80% of your wages for the rest of your life. That worked a long time ago, and it worked well. That's not real anymore. There aren't pensions like that anymore. The income to support a family is not there with that mindset anymore. The way we make money is differently. The way we use debt is different. I can't tell them this though. And I certainly can't expect the person that I spoke with to properly convey all of that information either. So I've got to decide at this point, hey, tell me, you married? Do you have a significant other? Oh yeah, they're great. Tell me a little bit about them. What do they do? Oh, my wife, Susan, she works at the bank. She's great, super supportive. She knows that real estate's been a passion of mine for a long time, and I put a lot of time and effort into it. She does a great job with her. She loves her job, and she's not really into real estate, but she knows I love it. Awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear that you have a great partner and they're supportive of you. Let me ask you this. Has Susan seen all the effort and frustration and trial and error that you've gone through in real estate so far? What is her take on that? Have you guys ever hired a coach before? Have you ever paid a mentor or been involved with any sort of mentorship to help you through this? Notice how I'm asking questions that kind of sprinkle all this in. It's like, what's your mindset around coaching? What's your mindset around what it's going to actually look like to get a solution? What's your spouse's take on that? If they invested before, what was it? What happened? Why do you think it didn't work out? Did it deliver the result you were looking for? How much of that fell on you not doing the work? And Bob, and I'm not giving you a hard time here, just being honest. Did you do exactly what you were supposed to do? Did you suit up and show up? Now, the client that I want to work with is going to hold some accountability there. You know what? I could have certainly worked harder. I could have certainly put in more offers. I could have certainly done this or that. However, what they promised and what they did was very, very different. And here's what I mean by that. That's a client I'd love to work with because I know that they're going to take accountability. But I also get to create a gap there around what they did before and how my program's going to be different. I'm not going to tell it right now. I'm just taking notes. Everything we did was group coaching, and they just, that everybody had different strategies. So we'd spend one day talking about wholesale, we'd spend another day talking about rentals, and we'd talk another day about funding. And I just didn't feel like I could ever get in a groove or a rhythm to get that machine working. Totally makes sense. So remember, I'm going to go back to that later. Hey, remember when you said it was only group coaching, you couldn't really get in a rhythm? How do you suppose that would change if you had a coach you were working with one-to-one, week-to-week over the next 6 to 12 months? If they knew exactly what your plan was, your strategy, your hesitations, your strengths and weaknesses, and they knew exactly where we were going, how do you suppose that would affect the outcome? That's a question I'm going to ask later when it's ready, but I need to cover the spouse. Okay, let me ask you this. So you've never worked with a mentor before. What do you think Susan would think about you potentially working with a coach one-to-one, knowing that there would obviously be a financial commitment involved, knowing there's going to be a time commitment involved, knowing that we're going to hold you accountable and you're going to hold us accountable? How do you suppose Susan would react to that or feel about that? What I'm not doing is I'm not going to drive the conversation into, well, do you think we need to have Susan on the phone? Do you think you could do this on your own? You're going to get a yes every single time. No, I don't need her. Yeah, or I don't need him. No, I'm the decision maker. I've done it before. I'll do it again. I like to just create a really easy transition here where it's like, I don't even ask, will they be involved? I ask, hey, are they going to be involved with the project? But it's like, okay, perfect. Well, we have a policy if we're going to have this conversation, if we're going to get into the nuts and bolts and how our program works, that if someone's in a partnership or a marriage, that the other partner's present. What does Susan's schedule look like to set up a call to get through the specifics of how we're going to actually help you? So what you'll notice down here on the offer area, how do I decide if I'm going to make an offer and talk about money today? 99.9% of the time, if you're making a four-figure or multiple four-figure investment, the spouse is going to be a deciding factor. And as the coach, I would certainly rather be on the phone with both spouses and be able to use that as a warm-up. Like, hey, Bob or Susan, great to meet you, right? Me and Bob have had a great conversation so far about helping him, get the ball rolling, helping you both get the ball rolling with real estate investing to solidify your retirement and create a legacy for your kids. Real quick, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, Bob, but what have you explained to, or Susan, let's do it this way. Susan, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what has Bob explained to you so far about our first conversation? You can do it like that, or you can just have, hey, Bob, if you don't mind, what have you shared with Susan about our first conversation? I want to see what his interpretation was of the first call and how much time they spent together. Because if she's like, look, he pulled me on the call, fighting and clawing. I don't know what this is about. Then I've got my work cut out for me, and I'm going to have to go way out and around her, right? If she gets on, she's like, you know what? He's been on a mission to do this, and he's shared that you guys might have the systems to be able to help us, get in a position to actually start acquiring some property and creating the passive income we're looking for the future. And, he seemed to feel pretty confident about this phone call. So that's why we're here. Perfect. That's what I want to hear, right? Every great once in a while, and I mean every great once in a while, you'll have a spouse that is supportive, right? And this typically comes in the form of whether husband, wife, or partner, whatever. They're typically they're the breadwinner in a major way. Like if somebody's got a $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year household, and one of them stays home while the other makes the money, right? The one that stays home takes care of the family, the kids, the house, everything, right? I'm not saying one's easier than the other because it's certainly not. However, it sometimes in those cases it's like, look, I invest, I own my own company, I invest multiple, 5 figures into it quarterly into coaches and training and help or marketing or whatever. Like, it's my business, and my wife truthfully is not involved with it. She doesn't want to be involved with it, or my husband's not involved with it. He doesn't want to be involved with it. He trusts that I make my decisions. There's a very fine line though on who that applies to. And a lot of the time they're going to kind of argue that with you. But if you've done a good enough job up here, driving that you actually understand their problem and creating connection here with the partner and spouse, it puts you in a different position, because it's like, well, how do they feel about it? Oh, they're tired of being, having things so tight all the time financially. They're tired of me working so many hours and never having time to go do, to show up to my son's baseball games or daughter's dance recitals. I'm tired of it. Right? They're tired of it. They're raising the kids on their own, and they know that I'm doing what I have to do, but like there's gotta, like, enough's enough, right? When I create that, what happens is I can start spending time on the mindset, and I can drive that into, am I making an offer or not today? If the spouse is the one on the phone's making a ton of money and they can prove to me that they're selling me on, look, I invest money all the time without them, and here's some examples, and here's why I do it this way. Maybe the spouse is literally very consumer minded, and the individual you're on the phone with is very entrepreneurial minded or investor minded. It's like, look, they'll never pull the trigger, and I decided I'm just making decisions on my own. Right? So that's where I'm going to decide when do I make the offer, and how much information do I cover about my offer, and how I might be able to solve that or serve them without going, okay, perfect. I want to build enough pain and enough clarity in call one, where if I know I'm going to get the spouse on the phone, it's like, gather all that data, make sure they fill it, get crystal clear. It's like, okay, perfect. Well, here's what we need to do. We're going to go ahead. I'm not going to ask. We're going to go ahead and schedule another call. I'd like to set this up tomorrow, at the latest Wednesday. I would just say it. I want to set this up tomorrow, and I want Susan on the line with us to go through this. So let me ask you this: before we schedule this, and it's totally up to you, I'm certainly not attached to a yes or no here. Are you and Susan willing to sit down together and put pen to paper? If I were to send over a few questions that I'd like more clarity on leading into our next call, are you and Susan willing to put in maybe 30, 40 minutes as a team and answer those questions and email them back to me prior to the appointment so that we can go into this thing prepared? Notice how I'm framing all of it. It's like I'm asking the questions. I'm the one driving how I want I'm steering the ship. Notice how as I cover all this, you guys, I'm pre-handling, I'm bringing objections to the surface during the sales call. The problem with most coaches' sales conversations is they're getting about 50%, 25 to 50% clarity. They don't ask any questions here. They don't spend any time on mindset, and they certainly don't talk about relationship to debt. So they basically get a small piece of the problem, half the recipe to the cake, and then they come down here and make an offer, and they scratch their head wondering why the deals aren't going through and why their clients aren't saying yes. When I talk about mindset, what do you think that has to do with making a decision? Think about this. I don't know if I'm ready. How many times have you heard that? Maybe I'll just keep doing what I'm doing and figure it out on my own because I don't have that type of money. I can't make that kind of investment without my spouse. I don't have that kind of money. We've got to cover all of that, you guys. How do they view debt and money? Do they realize the way that they view debt and money is the same thing that's holding them back from getting where they need to be? Think about it. It takes money to make money. They've always worked a job. Truthfully, hey, Bob, if your job, and I don't mean this rude, but if your job was ever going to create a solution, you've been there for the past 25 years, do you think it would have done it by now? Bob, when you think of debt, right, and this isn't just for real estate, you guys, I'm talking about debt because in most cases, your clients are going to use a credit card to invest in your program or a line of credit. We've got to teach them how to look at that debt differently. It's not their money, it's the bank's. We're letting the banks carry the heavy load. They're doing the heavy lifting while we're responsible for a small monthly payment back to the bank. So if we could make a small monthly payment back to the bank for a handful of months while we got this process going, whether it took us 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months, Are you willing to allow the bank to carry the load on a credit card, your credit card, so that we can show you how to do this, right? That's the end result. But before that, it's like, hey, what's your relationship to debt? When you think of incurring more debt, obviously to work with us work with our team, work with my program, whatever it is, there's going to require a financial investment. They're going to ask you how much, right? The people that are really worried about it, they're going to ask you how much. It's like, that's a really good question. Why do you ask? That's interesting. I don't typically get that in this conversation. Why? And I don't mean this rude, Bob, but why is that a concern to you right now? I want them to start realizing that they're thinking like a consumer, and if they're talking about starting a business or building something greater than what they have now, they've got to quit looking at the cost. They've got to start looking at it as an investment. What is the return on my investment? What is the potential return on my investment? Bob, when you think about incurring debt to start a business, whether it was $10, $20, $30,000 on a credit card, what's the first thing that goes through your mind? Notice how I'm breaking this down step by step. Hey, let me ask you something. You mentioned it's scary when you think about debt and incurring more credit card debt or starting a business. You mentioned it's scary for you. Why do you suppose that is? What's scary about it? Notice how I'm not taking any surface level answers, right? I'm getting right down to the brass tacks. Well, growing up, my parents had a lot of credit card debt. They had a lot of debt, and it just strapped them down to where we could never do anything as a family. And I've just always been afraid of it. My grandpa told me, my parents told me, like, don't use debt. Don't totally get that, Bob. And I think most of us are probably, or we're probably raised in a very similar position. Let me ask you something though. Taking the emotion out of it, if we look at it logically, is that theory around money serving you financially? Is it serving you in a way that creates time freedom for you and your wife or your spouse or your kids or anybody and your people you want to spend time with, your loved ones? I'm trying to drive down, it's not about the money or the debt. It's the way that they perceive debt and money. I'm going to talk about the entrepreneurial versus consumer mindset. What do you think separates the entrepreneur from the consumer when it comes to mindset and money? I want them to think through that. It's like, well, as a consumer, most of us are working a job. We refuse to invest money because it scares the heck out of us, right? Okay, for sure. The entrepreneur is more afraid of waking up at 65 years old insufficiently funded. They're way more afraid of that than taking a risk right now on a proven system with a team of people that's helped hundreds and hundreds of other individuals create that same dream or the know-how. Let me ask you something, Bob. Do you believe that if we were willing to take you under our wing and show you how to leverage the bank's money short-term on a credit card, the same way you're going to leverage the bank's money to invest in real estate? We're talking about a 2% monthly interest, even at 24% annual interest. Most people run and hightail it away from that. We've got to look at this differently though, because we don't have the money we don't have the money, so we're using the bank's money on a credit card. And even if we had our own cash, it's silly to use our own cash when we can use the bank's. So if you put 10 grand on a credit card, the bank wants 2% monthly, which is 24% annual interest. So that's $200 a month that you've got to be able to solve a $200 a month problem, knowing that our team's going to be guiding you through the process step by step. Now, Bob, I'm not attached to you making a yes or no decision. I'm not here to convince you that you need to invest 10 grand to work with my team. But here is the question I would ask. If we could truly show you how to find off-market opportunity, how to vet these real estate transactions, teach you how to build your power team, how to fund the deals and exit them appropriately, you suppose that $10,000 would be a wise investment considering it's coming from the bank rather than you? Notice how I'm going to spend time here and I'm going to break that down. I'm going to break that down to the point where they're like, you know what, the way I've been looking at this is all wrong. And it's not because I tell them, it's because I ask them. I go deeper and deeper and deeper to where it's like, you know what, you're right. The reason I don't do this is because I'm unwilling to use debt. The reason I don't have any cash is because I have a job, because I won't invest money, and it's a revolving circle, right? Once I get to that point, it's like, so let me just ask you, why do you feel like you're truly at a point where you're willing and able to look at debt differently? One of the things you can talk about before, and I probably should have brought this up first, is right here, how to qualify they have the money before the ask. So when I'm talking about what they do and what they want, it's like, okay, well, tell me a little, what does your investment budget look like? When it comes to real estate, obviously cash is king, credit's even better. Like, what does your investing budget look like? What kind of cash do you have set aside per? What about credit cards, home equity lines of credit, etc.? I'm going to get all that information up front before I'm asking about the money, before I'm diving into the personal situation. I'm not going to do it right out of the gate. I'm going to build some rapport, build some leadership, create some clarity, and then go into it. Because then when I come down here and I start breaking down the 10 grand or the 20 or the 50 or the 5, and I start breaking it down in that sense, it's like, look, it's not your money. And truthfully, I mean, let me just ask you, Bob, if we showed you how to do this step by step, if we could teach you how to move through this appropriately, how, why, when, where, how to make a direct path from where you are today to where you want to be safer and quicker than you could do on your own. Help me understand why that $10,000 of the bank's money would be a wise investment. What else? What else could potentially stand in the way of you and your client signing and paying today? Let's say they're single. They don't have a spouse or business partner. All these same things apply. But when I say what else, it's like I had a gentleman the other day, and there's a prime example, right? He had a client that the guy told him he had a $200,000 investing budget, right? The potential client said, I have a $200,000 investing budget from the sale of a business. Well, he didn't ask any other questions. He got blinded by this guy's got plenty of money to help for me to help him. And it's in real estate, right? So it's gonna having a $200,000 budget is great. It gives them a lot of opportunity, gives them a several legs up on a lot of folks that are starting out with very little to no money. What he didn't clarify though is, hey, well, cool. What kind of business did you have? When did you sell it? Are the funds liquid now? How long have they been sitting? Oh, okay. So I could see why you want to get those invested. He didn't ask those questions. Therefore, when he went into the close call or the pitch, if you will, he hadn't sold the business yet. And all of his credit cards were tapped out, maxed out completely, because he's in a legal battle with his business partner that had been embezzling money. So not only have we already spilt we've already shown our cards, we've already talked about what it costs, we've already told them all about the program, we've created leadership, we've created clarity. The client's going, look, this is exactly what I need. I just can't pay you until this thing's done. Wouldn't it make sense for me to go deeper into the conversation, find out that A, he's probably not going to be engaged in the coaching or in your coaching because he's going through this legal battle. And as we dug deeper, we found out that he had mediation starting next week. That guy is not going to be in any sort of headspace to start something like this. Not only will he miss coaching calls, but your odds of giving this guy a refund or a chargeback are going right through the roof. Wouldn't it make more sense to get that information up front and go, you know what? I really appreciate you sharing that with me. I know that's probably not something you talk about with a lot of people. How long do you suppose these legal proceedings are going to take? Where are you at in the process? Continue to get clarity on everything. Because if he's like, look, we're at mediation, we've already got a basic agreement outline that both parties have verbally agreed to, I think we can have it wrapped up in a couple weeks. Perfect. Here, Bob, are you open to suggestion? Sure, of course. Why don't we do this? I don't want to overwhelm you any more than you are now, and I feel like you could be a really good fit for what we've got going on over here. I can't overwhelm my coaches with clients that may or may not be able to commit to the appointments right now. Do you think it would make more sense for you and I to connect in the next couple of weeks, and I'll hold a spot for you then and get you started with your coach once these proceedings are done and you have the cash on the way? So what it does, I create leadership, massive leadership. It's like a salesman would never do that. A salesman's going to pick me apart, top to bottom. Where do you have other funds? Why don't I thought you had this. And they're gonna come out of this thing looking like a salesman, not in a bad way, but kind of in a bad way, where it's like, we had a great conversation. I felt like you led me, and now you're only after the money when I told you, like, I'm going through this big thing and I don't have it. Right here, be willing to back out. How do I decide if I make an offer and talk about the money today? Be willing to back out and leave them in a good spot where you've driven clarity, you've talked about and broke down their mindset. We've helped them understand there's a different relationship they must have with debt in order to succeed. If I can give you one more piece of advice on this, you guys, is I never talk about the money. I don't mind them knowing there's an investment. That part should be pretty obvious. Leading into your sales call, you should have that on your questions, right? Your assessment. I don't want them to know what it costs, because truthfully, the vast majority of consumers and even some entrepreneurs make their decision on the price tag versus the value and what they could actually receive from your program, provided they 100% committed and burn the ships. If you do all this and practice all of this, you guys, these objections will become a thing of the past. It doesn't mean that every deal is going to be today, but the let me think about it goes out the window. If you found this training valuable, please drop a comment below. Feel free to share with your friends. We'll see you in the next one.